Hi, I'm Patricia Greenberg, and this is It's Okay to Be Old. We're rebranding the show from Age Well to It's Okay to Be Old because I want everybody to know wherever you're at in life, whatever you're doing, it is okay. My guest today is Stella Fosse, and she's a woman who's letting the world know that it's okay to live a rich, full life at any age. She's a writer, a writing coach, published author, blogger, and all around advocate for living and loving life after 60. Welcome, Stella.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Now, from your website, I lifted this. All around us, women make discoveries, make love, run companies, and run countries. Wow, I love that. So, what events in your life led you to becoming a force of nature at this stage in your life?
Well, thanks. That's a great question. Um, I led the kind of life a lot of us lead. I have four children who are now all adults. I had a pretty demanding career in biotechnology as a writer, and then later running a department where folks were writing submissions to the Food and Drug Administration. And I hit this point when I was in my early 60s where I realized that there were many things I wanted to do and had wanted to do for years and had never had time. You may remember the book The Second Shift that
Oh,
talked
yes.
about,
Oh, sure.
yeah, how we as women take on so much during most of our adult lives, but then we hit this point where we still have great energy, where we still have lots of drive and creativity, and we no longer have those responsibilities start to fall away. Our kids grow up. We start to wind down the career that we had for most of our adult life, and we are liberated. We come into this time of freedom when we still have great energy, and we can basically start over again and do the things that we always wanted to do. And
Right.
that's where I found myself in my sort of early to mid 60s, coming into a time when instead of writing assigned things that I was given by my corporation, I could write whatever the heck I wanted. And what a great feeling that is.
And had you written or dabbled in novel writing or any kind of writing on the side all these years, or was it just, did you have
Not so
something in
much.
the works in your nightstand drawer in your journal cooking to be written?
Well, I did right before I retired, I did publish through a small publisher through with a pen name Jane Ishka. I published a scientific memoir on a totally different subject than what we're talking about
Oh,
today. It was about getting rid of a mite infestation and doing the research to figure out how to do that because really there's very little written about it. And that book continues to sell really well, even though I don't do anything to promote it, because again, there are very few resources for folks with that particular seemingly obscure problem. So yeah, that was really about it for writing aside from my scientific technical writing that I had been doing for decades on behalf of biotech companies.
well, that's very interesting because it is a needed subject. We never really know what's needed and what's going to sell and what's going to
Yeah,
be
it's
right.
true.
Um, so, I think we're being heard now. And as each of us continue to be bold, be out there, share our stories, before we get into the new work, tell us your writing and publishing history. Like
Yeah.
you've written a couple of books already. So tell us about that.
Yeah, yeah. So when I was getting ready to retire, I started learning more about what it was like for women trying to publish when they were not in their 20s, when they were not in their 30s. And what I found out was that there's frankly, a great deal of ageism and gendered ageism in the publishing industry.
Mhm.
And I started to wonder if I had missed the boat by being a technical writer and I'd written thousands of pages, but they're all locked in file drawers at the Food and Drug Administration.
Yeah,
Nobody knows that I
yeah,
wrote them.
yeah.
So around that time, a friend of mine named Lynx Cannon started a reading series in Oakland. I was living in California then, and it was called Dirty Old Women. And the idea was she invited her friends to write, who were over 50, to write erotic stories and come read them before a live audience once a month. And I thought that that sounded really scary and also really fun because that whole idea of writing erotica about and for women after midlife sort of turns the stereotype of women of a certain age upside down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It points out if you're writing and reading stories like that, you're confronting that gendered ageism and you're saying, hey, we live vivid lives and we have stories to tell about those vivid lives. It was really fun. It was a really fun experience. And one of the things that happened was that we always had a packed audience, and it was a mixed age audience, and mixed gender and mixed age. And women would come up to us, women in their 30s would come up to us after the readings and thank us because they said, we've been getting this message from the culture all our lives that this aspect of life ends at 40.
Oh,
And,
Stella,
and
women our age, you remember that 40 was the prospect, the thought of turning 40 was a nightmare. It
mhm.
was like everything's going to come to an end, and everyone were telling you that if you don't do it by 40, it's everything's too late. It's
Yeah,
never going to happen for you. Yeah,
exactly. I
yeah,
remember when I was a kid, I figured out that I was gonna be alive still for the next millennium, that
yeah,
when 2000 came, I'd still be alive. And I
yeah,
thought, well, that's great. For about 10 seconds, I was really happy. And then I realized I was going to be in my 40s.
yeah,
And I thought, oh, I might as well be dead.
yeah, yeah,
No, I
yeah.
mean, I mean, forget it. That's not going to be any fun. So yeah, we get this message, we internalize this message, and no, for me at least, no matter what I do to counteract those messages, it's like pulling weeds, you
Hmm.
know. The that internalized ageism keeps cropping up. We have to keep countering it, and that's one of the reasons why writing and sharing our vivid stories is important.
Right, absolutely. And you have a new book out. Write and Sell, a well-seasoned romance empowers women to tell vivid stories of late life love. So, what
Yeah.
was the impetus to teach others to write these stories?
Um, well, I when I wrote my first novel, which is called Brilliant Charming Bastard, I thought that I was writing a romance novel because I didn't really realize how structured the romance genre is. And when I realized after the fact that I wasn't going to be able to promote that book as a romance, that it's women's fiction, but it's not a romance novel, I started learning about what a romance novel really is and how it's structured, what the premise is, what the plot structure is, and so on. And I decided to write a book that met those criteria. And meanwhile, I was invited to teach a course. I had sort of floated this on LinkedIn. I'd said, I'm thinking about teaching a class. I want to call it Thee and Me Could Write a Bad Romance. And I was invited to teach that course for an organization that unfortunately no longer exists. And I don't think it's my fault because my class was actually really popular. But so I taught a class about romance writing. And simultaneously, I was working on my own romance. And then I also taught classes on editing and marketing and publishing. And I decided to put all that material together and write a book that would be sort of a recipe book where you could start at the beginning, form a premise for a romance novel, go all the way through character development, sidekick characters, etc., and then edit it, choose a publishing method, because these days, of course, we have lots of choices about how
Hmm.
we publish,
Hmm.
and then and on to the whole publicity and marketing phase. So it's a soup to nuts guide, and people are telling me that they are really benefiting from it. In fact, I've just been a beta reader for someone who wrote her first romance novel based on based on the book. So that's really gratifying. I think the more of our stories that are out there, the better.
No question about it. I have a question that, I always say we have a little preliminary Q&A before we start so that
Yeah.
we kind of know what we're talking about. But as a quick aside, one of
Yeah.
the things that I see, I've written 5 nonfiction books. They're cookbooks and self-help and healthy aging and so forth. And I'm
Yeah.
dabbling in novel writing. I belong to a few writing groups.
Great.
They really shove the format down your throat. They don't allow you to just be creative and write for writing's sake. A lot of these groups say you have to have this format in order to sell it. You have to have the villain, the arc, the lesson learned, the dark night of the soul,
Mhm.
all these
Right,
things.
right, right, right.
How
Yeah.
do you feel about that? I'm getting your book. I'm so excited about it. It
Oh,
hasn't arrived
good.
yet. But
Great.
do you feel that someone has to be a talented writer in order to write a book, or do you think, I hate using this word, but that it's an idiot-proof system that anybody could just sit down, look at the format, and follow it and get a book out?
Okay, I think you're asking two different
I
questions.
am asking two different
Yeah.
questions.
You're
Yeah.
asking a question about the nature of writing, and
Uh-huh.
you're asking a question about
You
fitting
have
the
to be
format of a
talented. Yeah.
genre. Do
Hmm.
you yeah, so maybe three questions.
Yes.
Okay. In the first place, I think that writing at its heart is play, and we are all capable of play.
Hmm.
Little kids are all scientists. Little kids are all artists. Little kids are all storytellers. And when we get to this point in life, when we're over 60, when we're again outgrowing some of these responsibilities that have been important in our lives up to this
Hmm.
point, but that we can start to shed, we can go back to play. And that to me, that is the most significant value in writing. It's beyond how many copies we sell. It's beyond even the sort of political benefit of sharing our vivid stories. The very first foundational benefit of writing is what it does for us as writers. And that comes from reconnecting with our playful self, reconnecting with who we were and what we wanted and what we enjoyed from the beginning of our lives. So that's a piece of answering your question. So no, I think everybody is a writer.
Yeah.
If you write a grocery list, you're a
Yes.
writer.
Yes.
Everybody's a writer.
I
And
appreciate that. That's a very, very profound statement because so many people say, I'm not a writer, I majored in biology, or I'm not a writer,
yeah,
I was an athlete, or I was, and nothing could be further from the truth. What you're saying is that if you just allow yourself to let feelings out on paper, you're writing.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When I was writing that first book, the memoir I was talking about earlier, I took some classes from a guy named Andy Couturier, who is fabulous on this subject. He is a huge proponent of this idea that writing is play and that all of us are capable
Mhm.
of of returning to that sense of play. And I recommend his book. His book is called Writing Open the Mind, and it's absolutely terrific. It I think we need to step aside from our inner critic. We all have this voice in our heads that's trying to protect us from criticism. And the way it tries to protect us from criticism is by criticizing us internally before we ever express ourselves. And that has value. One of the things I talk about in my new book is asking the inner critic to wait until we get to the proofreading stage, because the inner critic is very valuable when you're trying to figure out if you've misplaced a comma. The inner
Right.
critic is not as useful when you're brainstorming about what your premise might be for your next novel. So yeah, we get to do this. We get to have fun. We get to have tons of fun after age 60. Why not? Because if not now, when?
Oh, you've said my two favorite things. Why not? And if not now, when?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
love what you're saying. I'm shouting this out to the world right now. and I say this over and over again. My guests are my partners in getting the word out on certain things. And one of it is like, write for writing's sake.
Yeah.
It's to be enjoyed. There is no gun to your head. There is no deadline. There is no, it's just,
No.
people will say to me with all my books and all my work, well, how many copies did you sell? I'm like, why would you ask me that? How about,
Mhm.
what's in the book and
Mhm.
what's it about? So, I
Yeah.
learned that. Stella, I wanted to talk to you about that. I often see, especially the Hallmark type model, the focus
Yeah.
is on the 30 something main characters. And then there's the side love
Mhm.
story of the grandmother who was widowed
Yeah.
and she's falling in love with the uncle of the main character. And, so there's a little drama because the meet cute is always about they don't like each other when they meet, or there's some sort of drama
Yeah.
involved in that. For those of you who don't know, the meet cute means the point in a movie or in a book in which the love interests meet, and that's where the conflict begins.
Mhm.
And
Right.
uh, they're but the uncle and the grandmother, they're never the main focus of the story. So are
Right.
books featuring older adults as the main character becoming more popular?
Absolutely. So two things. One is you mentioned meet cute,
Yeah.
which brings us to another point or another question that you had earlier. Is this an idiot-proof system? If you're going to write something like a romance, um, uh, none of us is an idiot.
Right.
We all have the quality of genius, which
Yeah.
is play. But having said that, I think that anybody can channel that play into the formula for writing a romance. And if that's what you want to do, if you get my book, just to plug myself for a second, it does give you soup to nuts every little
Okay.
step.
Mhm.
And I really think that just about anybody can do that thing. Now, my book is really about writing romance about seasoned characters, which gets to the question you're asking now. Are these stories becoming more popular? Um, an acquaintance of mine, Ruth Saxton, who is a retired professor from Mills College and founded their women's studies program years ago, has a book out called The Book of Old Ladies, Celebrating Women of a Certain Age in Fiction. And in her book, and also I've interviewed her for my blog, she's terrific. In her book, she talks about the story of Little Red Riding Hood and how the grandmother in that story is, as she puts it, fodder for the wolf. The only role the grandmother has is she gets eaten by the wolf. Otherwise, it's all about Little Red Riding Hood.
Right.
And she talks about the progression that she sees as she's looking at literature over the decades and how we've migrated from the grandmother as, wolf food
Mhm.
to the point where we have, for example, Hacks on the television, a great
Right.
show about
Right.
an older woman and her love life and her adventures.
Mhm.
And and we see that. We see how we've progressed from really marginalizing older women to centering older women in more and more stories. And again, I think the more of these stories are out there, the better. We're really shifting the culture every time we tell a story about the vivid life of an older woman before it gets to be.
Okay. Yeah. So then the other thing that yes, we see a huge shift in TV, movies, books,
Mhm.
etc. But
Mhm.
I still think there's an element of the jokes are at the expense of the older women.
Oh,
We still
sure.
see a lot of that, and a lot of, there's a lot of pushback now about the way certain ethnicities are still portrayed in movies, TV, stories, books,
Mhm.
etc.
Mhm.
It's interesting, but I'm on a mission with you to really try to focus on letting people know that older women and older men have very vibrant lives.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
now. When you write these lovemaking scenes with the age of the characters in mind, is it more gentle and less pornographic, if you will? I think you know what I mean by that, right?
I do. I
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
And when you study romance, for example, they talk about heat level.
Uh-huh.
There's sweet romance all the way
Yes,
up to erotic romance.
yes,
And then, of course, erotica is a level beyond that.
right.
What I see in my own writing is a progression where I was initially writing erotica and have moved more into romance writing and into women's fiction where there isn't quite the same emphasis as there is in erotica on, the mechanics, on, the how parts of the body meet, and more emphasis on emotion and character development. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that has to do with my continuing development as a human being in addition to my development as a writer. So yeah, I think you're right. For me anyway, there's that shift. I don't necessarily think that would be true for every writer, but I do see that.
There's an element of that, when you're younger and that lustful,
Mhm.
feeling and people are turned on by wild sex or even perverted or kinky, whatever you want to call it. And
Yeah.
everyone I speak to as they get older, the intimacy is way more important.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
the I think that just goes with the whole package of getting older is that you want everything more meaningful as you age.
Yeah. That's
And
true.
I read a study years ago. I have to go back and find it because I know it's not professional to cite studies that you don't have the evidence for, but that a woman's sexual satisfaction has nothing to do with age, looks, social status. It has to do with how open one is to pleasure.
Hmm.
And,
Yeah.
our views on love and sex change as we age. And
Hmm.
what we see now as I think as older women is that all these young people, they're not wanting to get married. They
Hmm.
are hooking up and
Hmm.
with no commitment and it's a little disturbing to some of us at an older age. There seems to be no commitment, no values, no morals. But the flip side of that is they're living life the way that they want to. They're making
Hmm.
choices without a moral or social ostracizing from people. That's the way they're living their lives. So who are we to judge? If
Hmm.
that's um but it's like everything else. As you get older, you want more out of life. And I don't know if that comes with that 40, 50, 60, 70. Okay, I'm running out of time. I need to find quality in my life. But and as a reader and a viewer of all, I'm an avid reader, a movie, watch tons of movies. I'm just soaking up everything going on. I want to see older people persevere into older adulthood with positivity and optimism. Everybody deserves love, sex, companionship, whatever the arrangement is. And
Hmm.
so, as an aside, I know this isn't your thing. What tell older women who are looking for the right one or looking for love and romance? I'm sure people ask you about
Oh,
that all the time.
no, they don't
They
actually.
don't. Oh, I'm surprised. I'm surprised.
Uh, I met my partner on a dating website when I was 62.
Okay.
He
Wow.
was 64, and we'd both been divorced a couple times. And I don't think anybody's ever too old to meet someone significant who's going to be significant in their lives. We've been together almost 10 years. And um, I just would tell people to be open-minded because Joan Price's not Joan Price. I'm thinking of Joan Price's books are great too, but Ashton Applewhite's book, This Chair Rocks,
Yeah, sure, sure.
she has a whole chapter on finding love in our older years, and she talks about, people, there are more women than men as we get older, and There are ways to work around that and still find partnerships that are satisfying and marvelous, including, persevering dating guys. And, you know, I tell people you have to kiss a bunch of frogs and one of
Yes.
them's going to turn out to be a prince,
Okay.
or dating women,
Yeah.
or there's a not everywhere in the country, but certainly I lived for many years in the Bay Area, and there's a huge polyamorous community
Hmm.
there,
Hmm.
which is, I would say, at least 50% people over 60.
Is it
So,
really? Oh, that's
oh
interesting.
yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
In the
Okay.
Bay Area, that's true. I don't know
Yeah.
about other places, but so there are lots of ways to skin the cat, we
Yeah,
can.
life is fluid. There's all kinds of arrangements out there. I think, that's absolutely true, and be open. And, it would also, I feel, kind of like a closing remark about this is that, I want everybody to say, what can I do to make myself feel better about myself? What are the choices I want to make? What makes me happy? Self-love, whether it's physical,
Mhm.
psychological, emotional, you've got to love yourself first, and you've got to take care of yourself first. And it's not selfish. That's the other thing,
Yeah.
you know, uh, older women, especially women in their 60s and 70s now, who grew up with that, you do anything for yourself, it's selfish. If you stop and you want to wash your face because you haven't, you're taking care of your family, what are you doing? You're not taking care of me. You're taking care of yourself.
Mhm.
What's wrong with you? And that,
Yeah.
really, really leads to, this whole movement of women wanting to just, need 5 minutes to breathe and go away, and get away from it all. And
Hmm.
I think the same holds true for men.
Hmm.
I really, one of the things that like, I don't want to vilify men either. There's plenty of lovely, fabulous men out there who are also
Hmm.
looking for love at all ages. And
Hmm.
um, my friend tells a great story. When she was 75, someone asked her if she would go out with a man who was in his 90s. I think he was 98 at the time. She said, sure, why not? I'll try it. You never know. Well, they
That's
got
great.
married and they had a fabulous short lived life because he passed away. But she said it was the best. She'd been married a couple of times. She said it was the best time in her life, that
Hmm.
it was such a quality life. Every day meant something, every minute meant something. And,
Hmm.
that's, I'd like to feel that in my 60s. And I'd love to see my daughter in her 20s feel that every day is life well lived. Every second is a moment of happiness and love. So in
Yeah.
closing, Stella Fosse, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us that it's okay to have love, romance at any age. And for more information about Stella Fosse, you can go to www.stellafosse.com. Stella, again, tell us the name of your book and where it's available.
The newest book is Write and Sell a Well-Seasoned Romance, and it is available at your favorite online store, all of
Yes,
them,
all of them.
and
Okay.
also can be ordered at your local bookstore.
Okay, fantastic. And lastly, Stella, what do you like about getting older?
Oh, the freedom. I love the freedom of it. And I love the shift in perspective that we have as we get older. We start to realize what is important and to really be able to let go of what isn't important. And that is such a gift. And the joy of being able to continue to be creative, to be loving, to be, as you're saying, in the moment, those are things that are just beyond price.
Absolutely. I love that. Again, thank you so, so much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Great
Um,
talking with you.
And I want to thank all of you for listening to It's Okay to Be Old. And please subscribe to my channel for more engaging discussions on all things aging well. And for feedback and topic requests, you can contact me at www.patriciagreenberg.com. Stella, thank you so much. And I look forward to continuing this conversation at a later date.
I do too. Thank you again.
Thank you. And happy holidays.
You too.
Okay.